Aloha and welcome to the Hawaii Urban Gardener. Long time no see. Just to let you know, I don't do videos very often because my theory is that I want to show you kind of step by step how I do things instead of just planting something in the dirt and then calling it a day. So doing that needs patience and some time. So today we're going to talk about some dwarf tomatoes. So I have this Purple Rain dwarf tomato that I picked up off Baker's Creek Seeds. I looked at it recently and it had been sold out, so hopefully they come back with more. But you can get other dwarf tomatoes from other places. If you want to do online ordering, you just Google it, and there's tons of different companies that specialize only in dwarf tomatoes. Now, what is a dwarf tomato? Now, if you're using an urban setting and a small garden, usually when you do tomatoes, they're all very tall vines and you need a lot of support for them. A dwarf tomato gives you big sized tomatoes but are short and stout. So some people think, okay, well, a smaller tomato plant is only going to give me little cherry tomatoes, and that's not the case. The dwarf tomato has been bred to give you some pretty good sized tomatoes, just as good as a tall vine type tomato, but you can keep it nice and trim and just in a smaller pot. So we're going to do the Purple Rain type tomato today. Later on I might show you the Orange Hat tomato, which is a very tiny little plant. That one is more of a cherry tomato, but it's probably less than 3 feet tall. Hopefully we can get to that another day. So I'll show you from potting it in the soil and planting the seed and the steps of how it grew. All right, so we're going to be planting, like I said, a dwarf tomato. This is Purple Rain from Baker Creek Seeds. A dwarf tomato that should end up being about 3 feet and very compact. You can do it in a pot. This is a pot from Walmart. This is the same pot I had my daikon in, and just a regular pot. So we'll see how many tomatoes it makes and how big the tomatoes are and how compact and short it's going to be. So this is some of the soil that I used in the daikon plant. It's pretty much potting mix, and I'm going to re-amend it a little by putting some nutrients back into the soil since something else grew in it. So same thing like I showed you in the other tomato plant videos, I'm going to be using bone meal. So we're going to use 1 scoop of that, just 1 hand scoop, not too much. We're going to use some bone meal for the nitrogen. Also 1 scoop of that. And then we're going to use some worm castings. You don't have to have these. If you can't find worm castings, you can use the compost of your choice that you have in your garden if you have a compost bin, or just use manure or such. Just use 1 scoop of that. I'm also going to use some Epsom salt. This is kind of like a debate between gardeners, controversial issue where some people don't believe you need Epsom salt. I put it in all my tomato plants and never had a problem. If it works, it works. I think it works. It definitely doesn't kill your plants, but I'm probably going to use about a big tablespoon of it right in here. We're going to put some more in it later, and I'm just going to mix it up really well. All right, so I only have half a pot here. The rest I'm going to fill with brand new potting soil. The reason for that is that I use some of the potting soil for something else. But if you have a full pot of a vegetable that you already used and you still have leftover soil, you can do this to the whole pot. Since this was half, you're going to double it. So you would use 2 scoops of each that I showed. And then for the Epsom salt, maybe 2 tablespoons of it. I'm going to fill this up and I'll be right back with you. All right, so I filled up my pot with fresh potting soil for the rest of the half. And I'm not sure if you've seen, but it's really hard to see. I dug a little hole with just a couple of fingers and I just put a pinch of Epsom salt in there and mixed it in. So I'm going to make it flat again. And this one's going to be a seedling. So I'm going to just you can get a pen or just use your finger. I guess I'll use my finger, but you can just stick a stick in there just to make a hole for the seed. I know I'm probably going to get flack for this, but I don't like to waste seeds. And I know if you live in a different zone and seeds are hard to plant and you only have so much time to plant before frost comes, but in Hawaii, frost doesn't really come, so you can grow year-round. So I don't like to waste my seeds. They're very expensive, obviously. They get expensive day by day as inflation grows. So I'm going to put one seed in here. Other gardeners like to put 2 or 3 just for good measure and pluck out the weakest one once all of them grows. But usually I have pretty good luck with my seedlings growing and pretty high germination rates if it comes from a reputable place such as Baker Creek Seeds. So I don't have a problem. We're gonna water this gently and mist it. Don't put too much water where the seeds might float away and you'll ruin the top of the soil. And we'll see how this grows. I'm also gonna do another pot, exact pot like this, but I will spare you the repetitiveness. I'm going to do the same thing with the amending of the soil. And I have one little seedling here of the purple rain that sprouted up, and I'm going to plant that in there when this gets a little bit taller. If you're wondering why I put the bone meal and the blood meal and the worm castings in here, if you haven't seen my other videos, the bone meal is for calcium and for phosphorus. It promotes good root growth. It's organic. And also, if you don't know about growing tomatoes, tomatoes need calcium. Otherwise, they're not strong enough, and your tomatoes will have what's called blossom end rot, where the end of the tomato on the bottom starts rotting, and it just looks really bad, and it's sometimes inedible. So you don't want that, and that prevents it. It's a natural source of calcium, and the bone meal is a natural source of nitrogen, which makes the plant grow green and strong and have good leaves and stems. The worm castings are just a natural way of putting some micronutrients into the dirt. And the same as compost. If you have a compost bin, you can put that in there as well. If you're wondering about the Epsom salt, that's a good source of magnesium. And it doesn't hurt the plant at all. Like I said, it's a controversial issue. Some people think that it's not needed, but I haven't had a problem with it, and all my tomatoes are healthy, so I continue to put it in there because tomatoes also need magnesium as well as peppers. So that's the reasoning behind the mixture. And this should amend the soil and have it have nutrients that the other plant that was in it previously had probably sucked up from this potting soil. And I'll come back to you and see you on another day, maybe a couple of weeks from now, and see how this plant is doing as well as the seedling. So the seed germinated, it sprouted up pretty quickly. I think it came out within 4 days. And I'm going to pick off the bottom leaves just to make sure that it doesn't get any blight or rot, and also the baby leaves that popped up. This plant is about maybe 4 weeks old now, and it's pretty strong looking. The main stem is pretty strong and the leaves look healthy, and we'll come back to it another day. Okay, it's been a while since I've planted this purple rain dwarf tomato, and it's pretty much up to its maximum height. It is only probably 3 feet at most, but they produce very big tomatoes. I just picked a chocolate striped tomato that came out of my hydroponics bucket over there. That big tall thing produced about maybe 10 tomatoes so far. So they are very flavorful and I really enjoy them. I'm going to make some salsa with it. But as you can see here, back to the purple rain, we've got some flowers. They're pretty big. The bigger the flower, the bigger the tomato usually. So I did a little bit of, flicking like in my other video, just to get the pollen in there. And hopefully we get a tomato. We've got more flowers here, and a bunch in the back over there, and some more right here. So hopefully it produces a lot of tomatoes. It's been healthy so far. The stem is really thick. I'm going to have to prune some things and some of the little things in the corner right here. Pinch them off, but I'll prune it after this video, and I'll come back and show you the tomatoes. hopefully. So here is the Purple Rain Dwarf Tomato. It is flourishing really well. You can see there are some tomatoes coming through. There's one right there. And here's another. So lots of flowers, lots of tomatoes. Another little one up here. Big strong stem, but keeps pretty stout. And I don't think it's going to grow any taller. And it's just in this little pot. I did plant the other one. I didn't plant it at the same time as I said I would in the first planting video, because we were going on that trip and I was super busy, and once I came back I got really lazy. But this one's growing, same thing, and that's also in a fabric pot, not too big of a pot, and it's doing well as well. So we'll come back and hopefully these tomatoes will grow bigger. I'm not sure if I'm going to wait till they're ripe, because that would take forever. I noticed with bigger tomatoes it takes a long time to get ripe. Alright, so today is going to be my last update for the dwarf tomato plant. Again, this is the Purple Rain, and we got a couple tomatoes. This one's turning red. It's got a little bit of blemish on the bottom. It's not blossom end rot. I have a problem with aphids. They congregate underneath. I see a whole bunch of them, and I notice when I find them underneath it starts turning black. So I don't know if they're eating into it. So I had to spray a lot of neem oil almost every other day, and now this one's fine, and so is this one. Unfortunately, not so much this one, but I think I can cut off this bad part on the bottom. It's also starting to split, but this one's turning red, and they're pretty big tomatoes for a dwarf plant. Most people think that when you get a dwarf, any kind of dwarf plant, that the fruits or the vegetables will be small, but these are pretty good sized tomatoes. This one's the other one. I planted two. This one I planted a couple weeks after, since I didn't have time to plant both of them at the same time. And right now it's pretty much full height in a smaller pot. I believe this is like just a 3-gallon pot. And it's only about, maybe I would say, 3 feet in height at most. And I have another one coming out over here. I don't want to break it, but underneath has a smaller tomato. So, sorry it took a long time, but I had the problem with the aphids. I had to cut off 2 more of these and throw them away. They really started to get rotten. After I found out about the aphids, I started spraying and it pretty much stopped. So definitely not blossom end rot, because I give it enough magnesium and calcium, so it should be fine. So hopefully this was helpful, and hopefully this interests you in growing some dwarf tomatoes one of these days. Saves you some space and gives you big tomatoes. So hopefully you like this video. Hopefully it persuades you to look into some dwarf tomatoes if you don't have much garden space. Gives you very nice sized tomatoes, and you don't have to deal with a tall tomato vine. So until next time, I'll see you on another video. If you like this, press the like button, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again. Aloha.